Hey, it's Justin Harvey. Thanks for tuning into the Anesthesia and Pain Management Success podcast. With APM Success, we take a close look at important topics pertaining to business, practice management, personal finance, and careers for anesthesiologists and pain management physicians. We work hard to take your critical questions straight to the experts. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to episode 143 of APM Success. I'm very pleased to be joined by a returning guest, Dr. Navin Goyal. He joined us back in episode 81 to talk about some exciting work that he's been doing in bringing pediatric dental anesthesia to underserved populations, among many other things. I'm really excited to follow up with him today to hear more about his adventures. So Dr. Goyal, thanks for being here.
Justin, thanks for having me back.
I'm excited for this discussion. So just to give a brief recap, maybe you can mention for our listeners, and by the way, anybody who wants, apmsuccess.com/81, you can hear the precursor to this discussion today. But I want to just continue to look at your story and the really interesting journey you've had, clinical anesthesia for a long time and then pivoting into, I want to say the business world, but I mean, you're running a dental anesthesia company among other things. So to just allow listeners to enjoy that journey together with us. Maybe talk a little bit about your background and then what's been happening lately.
Yeah, so, an anesthesiologist by training and practice in private practice for about 13 years. Was also a medical director of one of our hospitals for several years, and eventually got the entrepreneurial bug and co-founded a company called SmileMD, which is a mobile anesthesia company that services many pediatric dentists in their offices, and then continued the entrepreneurial journey to help fund the entrepreneurs that I had met and was learning from, and started a fund which kind of further along became more of a firm, which is called Loud Capital. So I run Loud Capital full time now. I'm on the board and very involved in SmileMD, now known as OFFOR Health, and I no longer practice clinically. So that's kind of a high level description of what's up.
So when we spoke about a year ago, SmileMD was somewhere, but as I recall, between 16 and 18 employees, and you were beginning to get significant traction. So tell us a little bit about, first of all, where did the idea come from to provide the services that you described, and then what has the last 12 months looked like?
Yeah, so the idea came from a few dentists who wanted to have anesthesia services in their office, and there were high-end settings where they would get cash paying patients and wanted to basically provide a great experience. And of course, during a long procedure, even if you're paying a lot of money for a great mouthful of dental work, the experience is also important. And so if there was sedation, anesthesia involved, that would be the best. So after exploring it with a couple of my colleagues, we realized that there is an opportunity. There wasn't really a direct line between the anesthesia world of, let's call it the medical side and the hospital side, and these offices and specifically dental practices. And so we can ignore it and we can kind of keep that separate, or we can say, look, there are people that want it, and we knew there were cases that needed it. So how can we figure that out? And so that's what we kind of delved into and started learning and figuring things out. And the opportunity became something that we took action on. It was not easy and still isn't easy, but I believe true problem solving is never easy. It's just a necessary thing that people take. So last year we had about 17, 18 people, I think, when we last did our episode. Since then, we've raised a Series A, and we recently raised more capital. We've entered 4 states total now. I believe we're in one or just entering our second last time we spoke. And as of today, we have about 110, 112 employees with a really great leadership exec team that are actually moving from around the country here to Columbus, where our headquarters is. And we are going to be entering our 5th state in the next month. So
that is incredibly exciting. Congratulations on that really awesome growth. There's a lot that I want to understand about this, but maybe before we dive into the nuts and bolts of what OFFOR has done in the last 12 months, describe, especially for people who haven't heard the first episode, the the constraints that create significant backlog and significant waiting times for people
Of
who need
course.
dental work. And
Yeah.
how does your company work to address those constraints?
Yeah, of course. So the problem that we are solving today are, you know, a lot of problems, but the bread and butter currently is the dental world and pediatrics. And so if you're a 5-year-old kid, let's say, and you're in an underserved population, you're on Medicaid, you are very low on the totem pole in the healthcare system. So number one, dental is always low on the totem pole in the medical world. So you go in an operating room and you say dental, it's just going to be knocked down. It doesn't pay well. It's just not high priority because it's not truly medical. It's just this big line and divide between dental and medical. And then you go Medicaid, right? Underserved populations in general, you're lower on the totem pole because the reimbursements are lower. And so their prioritization is lower as well. Those are just the facts. It's not right, but it's the facts. And so right now in the state of Ohio, there's about a 9 to 12 month wait. If you're that child who needs, anesthesia to get this taken care of. And essentially, right, if we're an adult right now, me and you, Justin, and we go into a dental practice and we need to get something extracted, some of us can get some either sedation, laughing gas, little local anesthetic, and get it taken care of. If you're a child, you won't sit still, and basically we need anesthesia services to undergo this procedure. And the reason that they go to a surgery center, medical center, hospital, basically an operating room, is to get anesthesia, not because they need a sterile operating room. So what if you could bring those services to the office, do it in a safe manner, and do it in a very structured manner, which has taken years to build, and enable that? And that's what we do. So in Ohio, 9 to 12 month wait for an operating room. We go to the office that's in their community. That's where it's diagnosed, probably from the dentist there. And we get it done within a month. And what we do, and let's say the state of Illinois, which we're also at, in Chicago, it's a 22 to 24 month wait. And this is the US of A, 2022. You're a 5-year-old child on Medicaid living in Chicago, and you have dental work, and you need to go to see an operating room to undergo anesthesia. That's how long you wait. And once again, we can do that within a month in Chicago. And so we are solving a very specific and true problem. The problem with that problem is that's just one of many. So we're starting with something that's so obvious and affects a child's life when it comes to pain, concentration, malnutrition, and that's what we're solving today.
Yeah, I know you are a father. I too
Yeah.
have a 2-year-old, and I can only imagine, as a parent, you want to do everything possible to try to allow for your child's well-being, and how disempowering and depressing it must be to have someone tell you, get at the back of the line, we'll help your kid in 2 years with what is presumably a really urgent, like every day, every meal, it's impacting your life kind of need.
Yeah, and straight up here, look, I'm a father. I'm 45 years old. I have 2 girls. I love my girls. And if something happens, I want medical care. I have private insurance, and I know that actually will be taken care of quickly.
Yeah.
Now, the father of other kids who happen to be on Medicaid also loves their kids. Also wants to get that done soon. And yet the wait is crazy. So like, I'm definitely more empathetic being a father. And as I'm getting older, it's becoming crystal clear how ridiculous that is. And so it's all about how can we, not going to just complain here and say there's, life is unfair, because it is, but I'm really focused on the problem solving. So what can we do to make this happen? We're not going to wait on large medical systems. We're not going to wait on prioritization of operating rooms. No. We just need to figure out in an entrepreneurial way how to get this taken care of. And that's what we've been doing.
Yeah. So I can't imagine. I'm actually looking at beginning to bring on employees in my
Awesome.
financial planning company,
Congratulations.
which is great. And going from 0 to more than 0 is
Big deal.
it's a big shift.
It's a
So
big deal.
I can only imagine going from 17 to 100 plus is, well, frankly, it might be easier to do that than it is to go from 0 to 5. But
How about
I'm
different challenges? I
different
don't think
challenges.
easier,
Yeah, sure.
easier
So
is
I'm
not in the
curious to know
formula.
from from a leadership and management and, basically like getting a seat on that rocket ship, what have you learned? How have you developed as a leader and what challenges have you faced?
What I've learned is there's a lot of great personalities that come in that have a lot to contribute. Sometimes it's just not the piece of the puzzle that you need at that time. Or sometimes there's different reasons why people join. There's a talent and skill and a motivation, but not necessarily an alignment for what the North Star is of the company. And the North Star of the company is to provide access to care. And we use logistics, we use clinical, and we use technology. Those are the three pillars that we use to bring that together to fulfill our North Star. And sometimes you have really talented people who can do it, but essentially because times are going to get tough, not can, but will, um, is there an alignment there? And we've had normal, little bit of friction, amazing recruits come and still coming and joining. And it's just something I've learned personally to really evaluate how important alignment and culture and leadership is.
So as you've grown, obviously tell me about the way that you've experienced growth in the last 12 months. There's more and more dentists presumably that are interested in your services. You mentioned kind of state by state. So is there like a regulatory sort of restriction or something like that required, these hurdles that you need to clear in terms of state health department or something like that to be able to render your services in a given area?
Absolutely. So for the entrepreneurs out there, if you don't already know, healthcare in the U.S. is a tough one to pull off here. When you're taking care of a patient, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to be able to take care of that patient. And here's the not great thing is we have 50 states and each state is different. Each state requires different licensing regulations, this, you can do that. So we actually have spent a lot of money figuring out each state and regulatory, and we're going about it the right way, but it is no small feat. And so we've slowly been figuring each state out, and that's why you need to have a big team. That's why you need to have capital. This is not something that a few anesthesiologists and a few supplies can walk over and scale this. It really takes a diverse group of folks and talent and experiences with capital, and then a huge vision of what you want to do. And again, that's what we're on year 8 right now.
So tell me about the different roles that you've sort of grown into as your organization has scaled, and who are you currently trying to find? I'm sure there's some clinical people and some everybody else in the ecosystem you're creating.
Yeah, so we employ people who schedule our patients, do pre-ops. We employ physicians who do the anesthesia. We actually recently employed a physician for a medical director. Um, we employ paramedics and nurses for the clinical aspect because we have a whole care team when we go see patients, and then everything in between. And so, we just work with a lot of entities from, board of pharmacy, and I mean, you name it. And so it really just takes a lot of different skill sets and talent to get this going.
Do the physicians that work with you, are they full-time or are they doing this on a fractional basis generally?
We actually have both. We have some fully employed anesthesiologists. We have some that are more of a hybrid. They have some other jobs and give us availability. And one thing that's really interesting the last year is we've seen a lot more applicants. We've seen a lot more pool of talent just apply, because before it still is non-traditional.
Yeah.
But there was also some skepticism. Hey, I know what something that has to do outside of the operating rooms usually is less safe. It's usually you're on an island. You don't have as much help. You have less policies, less structure. And so that's something we've been working on since day one, is how do you mimic walking into an operating room and knowing that your supplies, your equipment, your staff are all there to help you and not go against you, which many times is what offsite means.
Yeah, I have no sense for how common dental anesthesia is, but I can tell you that every time I've seen it in a headline, it was when some routine thing went poorly, and in some cases, somebody died.
Yeah.
And regulators or other people are asking questions about what was going on here. And so I do have this sense of there's a broad, I mean, I don't know. I want to hear your perspective on this, but like there's the very responsible, very safe sort of model on one hand, and on the other, perhaps it's the Wild West.
Yeah. And that's just because I think the Wild West, which let's call it the non-operating room space,
Hmm.
right? So many times it's offices or offsite. It's just looked upon as a, hey, if we can't do in the OR, that's a potential area versus, hey, let's optimize the offsite office area to try to enable as much care, healthy patients that can be there, so we don't have to bring them to the operating room, which is very highly priced, which is
Yeah.
backlogged, which requires more people to staff, more specialists, and it should be used for certain things, right? If you have an orthopedic surgery, you're doing a total knee, you need a sterile operating room, you need a lot of more things. If you're extracting teeth, whether it's from kids or adults, that doesn't need to be there. There are other options, and we don't enable the other spaces enough. So it's really just focusing that on that and ensuring that the providers are comfortable and they're safe, which ensures the patients are safe. So it doesn't surprise me that you see these nightmare headlines, which you probably don't even see. Many of us don't see a really what goes on out there, but we have been really, there's a lot more of these cases that have been put on our plate,
Hmm.
and it's almost like we can't grow and fast enough, or other people grow fast enough to enable the care safely.
Yeah, one of the ones that I'm thinking of, I think it was a kid in California, like a 5-year-old who had something go, and this is like a few years ago now, and it, it went wrong. There was sedation involved. The kid died. It was very tragic, and now that left such a mark on the public psyche that now
Yep.
these handful of years later, there's still like the so and so bill. It's like named after the kid. That's before state
Yep.
legislation that they're looking to set these minimum thresholds, and so it's not. I mean, again, California is a big state. Presumably, there's a lot of dental procedures. So I don't know how big of a percentage that represents, but it's so when it goes bad, it's so just it's damaging to the dentistry profession. I got to imagine, and it makes consumers like if I was taking my kid to the dentist. I mean, I don't really have a sense of a lot of the questions to ask, but now that I know that some of the things to think about in terms of dental anesthesia, I'm very I'm very interested to understand how that would function in a given
I believe
dentist
that
setting.
was Caleb's law,
Yeah, that sounds right.
I believe. And so what's interesting is back in the day, anesthesiology was not a separate field, right? The surgeon would actually put the patient to sleep and then operate, and then sometimes they would realize the patient wouldn't wake up or something had happened. And so it just was determined that there should be someone watching the patient at all times. In the office space, let's call it the non-structured space, you have providers who are doing the procedure as well as sedating and obviously not able to watch the patients. And so that's what's been happening, which boggles my mind, because the reason this field was created was exactly what I said, was you have someone watching the patient at all times. And so is it practical to always have an anesthesiologist with every patient who gets sedated? I'm not saying that, but there needs to be a qualified person who at least is paying attention. And there's a whole spectrum of, without going too deep, but it's interesting. How do you enable the care? Because people do need care out there, and there's not enough people to stand as an anesthesiologist and watch every patient. I don't have the immediate solution, but again, I think what we're trying to work on is more structured and safe way to get care in the offices. And there's a lot of other folks required. Like we use paramedics now in a very different way,
Mhm.
than just paramedics working in an ambulance and going to various calls, because there's skill sets that are underutilized, and we're finding that out with nursing. We're finding that out with other physicians. So it's really like, how can you match un, unmet demand with unmet skill sets just by doing that, you can really optimize a lot more care.
So talk about how you describe the care team model that you're using to a dentist who's like, I heard about what you guys are doing. I'm casually interested and I want to learn more.
Yeah, so what we normally come in with is an anesthesiologist, a paramedic, and a nurse. We have a lot of help from them with regards to setup, with regards to having a hand placing the IV, etc. We have once we're done with one case and we go to the other, we have a nurse that's recovering the patient just like we would in a medical center. And so again, it's just this company being founded by three anesthesiologists. We said, how do we continue the care in a practical manner? Of course, if we could have every single piece of everything, we would try to do that. But that's not only economical, it's just not practical in a small office setting. So how do we make this work with the standards of anesthesiology, which has been the healthy middle of figuring things out? But I can tell you right now, what we're doing today is probably the safest that has, the safest structure and system that we've seen. It doesn't mean we don't have room to improve, but we're proud of what we've built. And we get a lot of input from the various anesthesiologists in different markets who say, hey, I did this. I really feel like we should do this. We have a whole peer review committee. We have a governing board. And we try to, again, mimic some of the healthy processes that we did in the hospitals.
So as you're describing, I'm sure every dentist would love to say, or loves the idea of like three people watching their patient while they're doing it, dental work. But this is making me think, what is the cost of having these three people do that? So if there's challenges with reimbursement, Medicaid patients, whatever, can you describe a little bit about the economic model and how this sort of is sustainable for a dentist?
Yeah, so let's just take that 5-year-old kid, and they have a 24-month wait in Chicago. What many times will happen is the kid's going to have pain, have some other issues with nutrition, go to the ER, have more doctor visits. In the meantime, they're still waiting for the operating room to get this done. And so if you think about the incurred time and medical expenses from the other visits and the progression of disease, et cetera, that is a huge cost. And guess what? Then 24 months later, they end up going to the operating room, they get it done. How much did that cost for that operating room with that staff, facility fees, et cetera? So now you take that whole 24-month journey, take those expenses, and you reduce it significantly for the care that we provide, let's say within a month. Then you look at it in a very different perspective, right? So we're not walking in and just saying, hey, we are adding expenses by bringing more people here. What we're doing is we're avoiding you going to a more heavy cost center down the road with probably some in-between medical expenses and progression of disease. And again, if you look at time of productivity, if you look at logistics, there's so many factors and data points that we're collecting and it's really trying to organize to really be able to tell this story. We are significantly reducing costs for the healthcare systems, optimizing for productivity of, let's call it, the family, and obviously taking away pain. And then we're saving money to insurance companies. So this is one of those scenarios where you walk in and where everyone wins at the table. Yes.
So I know one of the challenges, especially with Medicaid, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, is reimbursement rates. Anesthesia is like famously bad for the how much you get from Medicare versus the usual and customary rates. So in terms of somebody on Medicaid, can you just explain how the billing works, I guess, or if Medicaid is still paying for the patient's care for the anesthesia services, is the anesthesiologist and the rest of the care team being compensated in a way that covers their costs?
It's a great question. Everyone's being compensated at least as competitive as the hospitals. And here's what's interesting when you talk about an anesthesiologist working on, let's say, a patient on Medicaid in the hospital. Let's say they see their reimbursement and it's not great. But do you think that Medicaid paid the whole hospital system, including the anesthesiologist? Do you think it's a really, really small chunk change that the anesthesiologist saw, or is there more to it? And that's what I've learned. There's actually a bigger check that's written to the hospitals. And I'm not saying it's still the amount of a private insurer, but there is more money that goes to the hospital and to cover the expenses. I mean, there's other benefits. There's, no hospital system would take Medicaid just because they have to. They'll make sure there's something that covers them. And so all I'm saying is you take that money and you can still reduce the amount that the insurance company pays and still make a for-profit business work with everyone being paid adequately. And that's what we've done. We've just kind of taken out the high cost of care for simpler procedures on healthy patients, and we're enabling the care elsewhere, still saving money. So when you compare it comprehensively, which many physicians, many individuals just don't know because they haven't been introduced to it. For me, leaving the healthcare system 2 years ago and seeing what I see, talking to people that I meet, it's interesting that the larger picture.
Absolutely. I mean, you just described sort of the classic problem. One of the classic problems in healthcare is that prevention is just so much cheaper.
Yeah,
or handling things timely is so much cheaper than letting it get as bad as it needs to get for you to then demand the OR because it's like a very acute, serious issue.
exactly. Exactly.
Tell me about the anesthesiologists who are now working for you and where are they coming from, especially in the last couple of years. Last 12 months obviously has been a weird time to be an anesthesiologist. One of the things that we talk about again on the show is the macro demand. Anesthesia is just desperately needed all over the place, but the micro instability between
Yeah.
one group, one contract, one site of service. There's a lot, anesthesiologists strangely are still losing their jobs in certain places based on politics, based on contracts. So
Yeah.
who have you found that's interested in coming to work for your company? Where are they coming from?
It's interesting. We're actually seeing a spectrum of folks. So young folks just coming out of residency who, again, before were looking to just join a hospital system or a large practice. We no longer are seeing that. We're seeing some young folks apply directly from residency. We're seeing pediatric anesthesiologists from excellent children's hospitals, again, range in experience. We're also seeing folks who were about to retire or towards their retiring years who said, wow, I can only do a few shifts if I want to. And just to go to the foundation of how we talk to people, we have a lot of flexible hours. We don't have any call or nights, and we see healthy patients, ASA 1 and 2 in offices, because we're not here to push any boundaries. It's just, again, taking care of people who don't need to go to the medical centers. So we've been able to recruit pretty well, especially the last year. Again, I think growing to the size we have, we have people fly in to shadow, and we're open for feedback, positive or negative, but it's really great to hear from different training programs and different experiences that fly in and say, wow, this operation is pretty impressive, or hey, this is great, but this is what I suggest. So for us, we're just a sponge. We're trying to learn, but I believe we've provided a great experience so far.
Yeah, and I think the growth you've seen kind of speaks for itself as to the demand for what you're providing and the way that you're quickly iterating to meet that demand.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's good. It feels good to be here, but I'll tell you, the first couple of years, it was calling every anesthesiologist we knew to fill in spots because there was skepticism or because we didn't have enough demand at that time, and so it's just trying to match it. Now we have more demand than we can match, and that's a good problem to have. But if any anesthesiologists are listening to this, we'd love for you to apply.
Tell me about a day in the life of a dental anesthesiologist.
Yeah.
You
So
mentioned the schedule, and it's obviously like it sounds like a little bit more of like a 9 to 4
oh yeah.
kind
So
of thing.
sometimes so every practice is different, but our anesthesiologists know the schedule, like the day before, how many patients, etc. And sometimes it's walking in at it's 7 a.m. Things are set up. You see your first patient, and sometimes there's 4 or 5 patients. Sometimes there's more. Sometimes there's a little less. So it's varied, but there won't be nights. There won't be weekends, and sometimes the practice is really close to you. Sometimes it's a little bit farther. It just depends. And we're building technology right now to optimize the experience of the provider. So you're an anesthesiologist and you have experience in this and you prefer this, and we're putting that in and calculating the best schedule for you.
Cool. Um, so, you had 13 years being a clinician as an attending plus training, and then you kind of pivoted out and now you're, running OFFOR. And can you talk a little bit about some of the other Loud Capital you mentioned as well? Talk about the other broader, the broader vision that you have for the work that you do.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, to clarify, so I have a full exec team for OFFOR Health, including a CEO who runs it full time.
Great.
So I'm on the governing board, peer review, and very heavily involved as a co-founder. But formally, we have a whole leadership team that runs it daily and doing an excellent job. I run Loud Capital full time as CEO. When I left at the end of 2019, it was to run Loud Capital because we did already have a team for OFFOR Health. And so for me, my daily job is to, or I should say my daily purpose is to, number one, educate new people about what impact investing is, what social impact means, and what social entrepreneurship is. And so it's like, how can you build, just like we're talking about with OFFOR Health, for-profit models, which for-profit, of course, for-profit, but sustainable. When you build a smart business model, that means it can last. And so that's why I really am about the for-profit social impact model. And so I educate new investors who want to invest in this space because we could use more money and resources that go towards great people and purposes. We talk about returns on various alternative investments. And then on the entrepreneurial side, we build and invest in great companies. And so we actually build companies in-house. One of them is called Beyond Physician, that's being launched in a couple of weeks, which is a platform for physicians to learn, earn, and grow is the tagline. And so how do you optimize yourself and learn different skills to be able to earn income from various sources outside of clinical? And so the larger vision of that is, how can physicians, medical students, and residents enable themselves with the skill sets to earn in different ways? And right now, there's not an aggregated platform or an aggregated way to learn and do side gigs all on one highly user-friendly technology platform.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, about Beyond Physician?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Beyond Physician, just imagine, especially it's probably more important now than it ever has been. So imagine a couple of years ago that the world shuts down and you have some entrepreneurs earning income. Let's say you have marketing skill sets and you go to Fiverr or you go to an online job marketplace and you're able to give your skill sets to clients. Well, there was a lot of physicians that were stuck at home and they get paid for their clinical expertise. And so if you can't practice clinically, there's not a lot of ways to use your skill sets up here, your intellect, your experience, and other things you can do. It's really hard to earn income. And so that personally hit me in the heart because I was like, that's crazy. Because there was a lot of physicians that were talking to me like, Navin, I wish I went into business like you did. And, I was undergoing my own obstacles, of course, but it made me think like, that's crazy. You're a highly specialized, pretty much badass over here. And you should be able to use your skill sets to earn income. And it's not just earning income, it's earning income and expanding your mindset, right? Like human nature is, if we can earn income in different streams, it's more fulfilling versus just one. It's just like, filling different buckets. And so that's how I feel this platform can be for our physician community. And we are including medical students and residents because we're all in the same community. How can you empower our community to do different things? And we can talk about leadership courses, we can talk about coaching, we can all these individual things, which are great, by the way, but something larger and more comprehensive. And so that's what this platform is. And so it'll be, I'm not sure when this is going to be, this episode is going to go out, but end of April we'll be live, and there'll be med students, physicians, and residents who can log on, for free and see any gigs, anything they can learn and earn But then on the outside, Justin, this is where yourself and I think a lot of other folks, whoever needs a student, a resident, a physician, whether you're a law firm, whether you're a company who just wants some direction from a physician, they can come to this platform. And so it's really just utilizing a great, highly specialized skill set of people who don't currently have a home.
Awesome. So for anybody listening, apmsuccess.com/143, we're going to provide links to all the things we've discussed today, including this platform, which this probably will be going live maybe right around the end of April. So
Oh, nice.
Perfect timing if anybody's listening wants to go check it out. This is a cause near and dear to my heart. I always encourage people, it starts before you even sign the contract. You need to make sure that if you're signing an employment agreement, your employment agreement allows you to maintain your own intellectual property and allows you to do things on your own time, even if they are clinical in ways that don't directly compete with your employer, to be able to do precisely what you just described. There's going to be a lot of people listening right now that are at big academic center ABC who signed their life away when they signed their employment agreement and says you basically can't do anything unless you're doing clinical anesthesia for us. So this is a good opportunity for anybody out there, like check out what you've signed, see what kind of flexibility that you have. And for anybody who's looking at job offers, this is an important point of negotiation to say, like, listen, if I'm doing something on a Saturday morning on my own time, I should be able to segment that and earn money that doesn't, have anything to do with my employer.
If you provide that service, or of people that provide that service, they will be needed and wanted on the platform. So imagine, again, you're a resident and you just got your first job. You can come to this platform and say, hey, I want someone to review this for me. Again, specifically to find that. Because I know when I got mine reviewed, I called a bazillion people and said, oh yeah, I know an attorney who knows this. So instead of doing that, you can just log on and do that for yourself. And that's literally the whole point of this platform, is to, I guess, empower the physician community with skill sets and opportunities to grow.
Tell me about the way that you sort of have seen medicine evolve in the last couple of years. I know that, you got out basically right before COVID happened, but you've still been closely involved in the medical ecosystem. You also have, as you mentioned, two daughters, and I'm sure that they probably look at what dad's doing and want to emulate your example in some way. So tell me about the way that you see medicine evolving and the way that you perhaps would counsel your kids if they're thinking about a career in that direction, things to think about.
Sure. I still believe the core and field of medicine is awesome, but I think more and more as time is moving forward and the world is changing, the structure of clinical medicine is the exact same. And so to me, it hasn't been as much the structure and culture have changed actually at all. It's everyone else is changing, including the world, and it's not caught up. And so what I tell folks is, I left clinical medicine and people call me, reach out all the time from literally around different countries as well, because everyone's, human condition, right? They say, gosh, should I do clinical medicine? And I don't have, I'm not trying to encourage people to leave, but what I do tell people is that my expectation of clinical medicine, I never even thought about other things because I thought that was it. That was going to fill my bucket. But we all change. We all want to problem solve. So if you're doing the same job and you're feeling like you're not learning something new or doing something new or using different parts of your brain, that's not going to be good for you. And so right now, clinical medicine is very just one pathway. So my dream for our field of medicine, and whether my daughters go into it or not, is just ensure that clinical is there, but that's going to be one of many buckets that you need to fill to feel complete and comprehensive. No one ever told me that, and people don't talk about it enough. That's what I tell medical students, residents, physicians, whoever wants to go in. And actually this applies to any profession. This is just be armed to continue wanting to problem solve, be armed to continue to want to fill other buckets. We call it, oh, you're bored with your job or you weren't happy. No, that's not it. This is actually part of the package that no one told us about. So as long as the future physicians are practicing clinically, but also doing some other things to not only be more well-rounded and smarter about everything they do, but about also just being fulfilled so we're not leaving in troves like we're doing today.
Yeah, that's a big part of the mission of this show is to try to, as much as possible, equip physicians to go as far and as well as they can, knowing that the pressures and stresses are immense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And you hit on a great point, and this is something that I've listened to others. I love podcasts because it's like having a conversation with people 10 times as smart as you, and you can have those conversations as often as you want when you're working out and things. And I think it was Seth Godin, who's a business and marketing maven, who was talking about creative problem solving and the way to like equip your kid to compete and succeed in a global economy. It was a very sort of esoteric discussion, but creative problem solving is basically the last thing that AI can take from us. And obviously there's different ways to define that, but if you can think outside the box, identify problems, and then think about the 172 different ways you could potentially solve it, and then identify the 6 best ways that are realistic solutions, and then vet those one by one until you find the one way. Like, as long as you're training your brain and helping your fellow humans to think in that way, that's always going to allow you to be relevant vocationally and equip you to make the world a better place. And I think what you just described is precisely that for doctors, and taking these incredible, clinical experience plus academic background that they have amassed over decades, which is really like can't be replicated in any way other than just the brute force of going through the process,
Yeah.
and then giving an extra opportunity to leverage this not only in the clinical realm, but to creatively solve problems that, frankly, like doctors are the only ones who have the body of experience that's required to solve certain problems, certain very complicated, very big problems. And so that's why, as you're describing this platform, I'm excited to see the ways in which physicians hopefully will be like unleashed to use that cumulative experience to do new and exciting things.
Yeah, no, we're very excited. And I recently wrote a book on it's called Physician Underdog, on the whole journey of my story of wanting to be a physician and kind of the mindset shift going into entrepreneurship, going into venture capital, and what I see as the future physicians and what they can do. And that stems from the job I left, the private practice I left is still the same. There's not much that has been changed. Still a great private practice job, but I changed a lot. That's the thing though. That's inevitable. People change, and I think the pandemic accelerated change. But everything else has been kind of the same, and that's the problem. So it's really just how can you empower yourself, no matter where you are in your journey, and because many of us have these tools that we just don't leverage and use, or we don't have confidence. Everything's here. We don't need to buy anything. We don't need to do anything special. We just need to look inward and then apply it.
Tell us about the journey that you went on to acquire that confidence, because in my observation as an outsider, I mean, my wife is an anesthesiologist obviously, but I haven't gone through med school and residency, but I view it a little bit like the army, where they break you down and you come in as an individual and then you get turned into something as part of a greater effort. That there's a cycle. If you go in as a rugged individualist as an MS1, you're going to come out something very different as a PGY4. And I think some physicians preserve that sense of, I don't want to call it individualism, but like the entrepreneurial spirit a little bit. And others who eventually want to be entrepreneurs have to like develop that or find it in a way that it hasn't existed in their own heart and mind before. So I'm curious, how did you experience that through your journey? Was it already there as an MS1, or did it have to grow during your time clinically?
I think when I look back, I think my risk tolerance was very low. Risk tolerance was high or low? What am I
Yeah, it
saying?
was low. So you wanted something low risk in terms of career, is what you're
No,
saying?
my risk tolerance. No, so I was able to take risk. I don't know why I can't figure this out. I was able to take risk pretty early, and so I'm probably not your traditional physician mindset. But when you were talking about kind of getting beaten down and going down this route, I actually think what physicians think is being so specializing, highly trained at what they do, I feel like they apply that to everything else. So they lose confidence in doing something in a different field because they feel they need to be an expert in it. And when you realize that it's completely opposite, right? That's why you have high school, college dropouts starting companies and doing what they do, or whoever. It's like, how did they do that? They didn't even know about technology, but yet they just did it. It's just a lack of fear. And it's a lack of this expectation for yourself. So if you just take down expectations, and that's what I talk a little bit about in the book is, there's a lot of people that are just winging it. And in the field of medicine, you can't wing it, and there's people's lives on hand here. But when it comes to the entrepreneurial world, you can learn this stuff. Anyone can learn this stuff. And, even this morning, I got a inbound message about, how come I didn't do my MBA, and, how did I get into business? And, in the end, if you want experience, I just put myself into experience. I learned from other people around me. I started doing, and then I started thinking a little bit more versus overthinking and not doing. And it's no one's fault. It's just everyone needs a little nudge to realize that they are a very well accomplished, highly intelligent person who takes care of people's lives today. You can do anything.
I could not agree more heartily. Anybody who's watching on the YouTube channel will see my head nodding up and down emphatically as you were sharing that. I think that medicine trains you to do the opposite. It's like the stakes are so high, you don't do anything unless you know what's going to happen. Yeah. Except for very limited circumstances where business. I have a lot of friends that are entrepreneurs. I am an entrepreneur, and many other friends who are business owners of all different stripes. And they all have to, it's you experiment until you find the thing that works. Yeah. And it does require a mindset shift and an awareness that this isn't, medicine operates in a certain way, and the rest of business is just operates in a totally different way. Yeah. And embracing that reality, I think, is probably an important first step to opening yourself up to say, if I fail, then it's the Thomas Edison experience. I found the thing that didn't work, and I'm going to keep on going until I find that one. Hopefully it's not number 2000 the way it was for him. But could not agree more. So, you mentioned the MBA. I wanted to ask you about this because I saw you post about it, I think on LinkedIn, maybe in the last day or so. Anybody who would come to you and say hey, I'm thinking about an MBA, I think there's embedded in there the physician sort of experience informing the way I think the path forward is to get the piece of paper that tells me that I can go do a thing, and then I'll go do the thing. So if somebody asked you about, you don't have an MBA, you're running a venture capital company, and you seem to be a pretty successful business person, how would you sort of counsel them as they're thinking about that?
Yeah. Simply said, I'll say, what's the goal of it? And sometimes people say, well, I just want to learn business. I want to get into business. I want to do something business. I want to figure out maybe something business. So to me, those are very broad answers, and there's nothing wrong with it. I just encourage people to really think, if your goal is to learn about business, then you don't have to do an MBA and spend money and time on getting a degree. There's free courses, paid courses online. There's people you can talk to. There's mentorship opportunities. You can learn a ton from other people and experiences. Some people will say, well, I want to get this position within my hospital or somewhere. They require an MBA, and that's important to me. That makes sense. Go for it. Yeah. But I will say a lot of times there's not necessarily this direct goal, and there's a direct way that this degree helps them get that goal. And broadly speaking, that's how I feel about any degree, including college. Now, that was the norm. Just let's go to college and let's figure it out. Well, guess what? College isn't cheap. And I see plenty of people who are not closer to their truth or their pathway after college. So I am really rethinking a lot of things. And this money and time that is used to help you mature, what about gaining direct experience? What about going straight for an employer? So on the business world, the entrepreneurial world, and the educational world, I'm trying to bring more businesses that can take more students that have certain skill sets that can be learned, and start employment sooner. So number one, they're earning money, they're earning experience, and then they're figuring out what their skill sets are as they go along. It's direct application. So that's where my mindset is.
And they're staying out of debt.
And they're staying out of debt.
Inverse opportunity cost of, instead of paying $190,000 to go to this university to get a piece of paper to hopefully then find a job, you get experience and get money and learn some of those lessons to then evaluate if that is good. I think more and more higher ed, man, It's we're headed towards this really interesting sort of paradoxical place, and I'm
Yes.
very curious. I'm glad Calvin's only 2 right now, my son, because I think
Yeah.
by the time another 16 years have elapsed, hopefully we'll have a little more clarity about the best way to, equip yourself
Yeah.
for vocation in the future world.
I've really embraced design thinking and experiential learning. And so we actually have a in-house company called Inventi that consults with higher ed, but also have our own lab school. So while we're digging into this and building this, I'm learning more. I'm like, wow, this is how school should be. So it's interesting. My perspective is changing very quickly, but I don't think I'm alone.
Excellent. If people out here are listening and they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to contact you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm actually on all socials, but LinkedIn, I probably post daily and share about entrepreneurship, healthcare, venture capital, leadership. So they can follow or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I also have a website, physicianunderdog.com, which is the name of the book, has the book on there. It has some resources to different books to read or listen to just to expand their mindset, and a few other things, how to join beyondphysician.com, as well as go to loudcapital.com, loud.vc, etc. So there's a lot of resources on the website.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Navin Goyal, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of APM Success.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you liked what you heard this week, head on over to apmsuccess.com, where you can find more content and free resources to help you build a successful career in anesthesia and pain management. If you wanted to leave a review in iTunes, I'd also really appreciate it. Thanks for using some of your valuable time to join me today on APM Success.